I'm here to tell everybody what we all saw in that ring. Inferior officiating, ridiculous antics by that Amazon warrior from the future. CJP was ripped off. I am your rightful Show Me State Heavyweight Champion. We all saw what happened, and one day soon, the belt will be right around my waist where it belongs. You heard it here first, Arcadia. The title's coming home.
Better luck next time to CJP. We'll talk about that here in a little while when we go into our review of Show Me State's Wrestling Retro Combat, but let's just say there's a spoiler there for you. So, episode 2. Thank you all. This is Arcadia Pod, and I'm here with my second episode. So, one more than a lot of people get. We're trying it again here, seeing what we do. The setup seems to be working, so it turned out a little better than I even thought it would last time. So here we are. I need to probably change my lighting so that I don't have the literal sun above my head, but it's either this or I look like I'm recording in a closet, so take one or the other. All right, so what we're going to be talking about on this show is the results of the aforementioned Show Me State's Wrestling show that went on this past weekend, and we're going to be gearing up for KCXW Unleashed 2026, which is, as of this recording here in a couple days, on Saturday, on April 25th, I believe. And if that's wrong, my apologies. All right. We're going to get some news out of the way here, and a lot of our news is pretty much just show announcements and some stuff from shows that I did not attend. As I mentioned last time, there was a New Breed Wrestling show in Ava, Missouri, which is an insane distance away from me, so I was not going to make that one. And there was a Dwarfinator show, which one of these days I'll try to attend one of those, but it was just not going to happen this time. All right, so here we go. So, Show Me State Wrestling is going to have their next show on... Oh, that's a typo, I believe. I think it's actually May 16th, whatever the Saturday of that week is. And it's Floating and Fighting out of Salem, Missouri. So those of you in the central Missouri region are going to be able to easily go to that. That's a ways out for me, but I remember seeing some of the clips from this show last year, and it looked pretty cool. So there's that. And looks like you've got people like, even Brusador Valencia coming in from way on the other end of Kansas. So, pretty cool. It's a long drive. I don't know how some of these guys do it. All right, we had a couple title changes at Scarlet Mania in Ava, Missouri. And my cat's trying to already sabotage this. Okay, Ava, Missouri, you had your 2025 Arcadia Pod Wrestler of the Year, Big Joe Helms, ended up coming away with the U.S. Championship. And you've got Frodo the Ghost, who is now your TV champion and tag team champion, dual champ at the moment. So congrats to both of them. And their next show is going to be May 23rd in Sedalia, and I will be going to that one most likely. So keep an eye out for a rundown of that. When we get more information, we can tell just from looking at it that we're going to have Mike Maverick versus Kenny Kingston. So looks like good show. If you see me moving my arms and stuff, my cat has decided that he really needs to be on camera right now. And we might do that here at some point, but right now he's driving me crazy. So let's move on. Mailbag. I actually knew that this was going to be kind of a shorter one in terms of some of the content that I had last time. And so I had posted a thing for people to potentially send me some notifications on Facebook, and I was going to try to answer them. So let's look at a few of these. And if I don't have time to do all these right now, I can always move ahead and do these next time. All right. Looks like first question: how many shows do you go to each year, and how has it progressed through the multiple years you've been doing this? So, speaking specifically in terms of me, like reviewing things and everything, which I've talked to people before, and this is a complete accident that this happened because I have always gone to independent wrestling shows, and I just randomly decided when I brought my blogging back around COVID time and I started taking my son to shows that I would write stuff down, and honestly, everything just kind of got out of hand at that point. So here we are. I actually ran through, and I think as of right now, I am sitting since 2022, which is roughly when this project, if you consider it a project, would have started. The first show I went to post-COVID, basically, well, I take that back. I went to a WLW show in 2021, and then they immediately locked everything down again, but I didn't do a review of it at that time. But anyway, 2022 was a Central States Wrestling show. Since including that show, and since then, I have gone to 70 shows. So last year I actually went to 30, which is a lot. I don't believe I'm going to get anywhere close to that this year. Probably 20 or 25 or so. There's too many shows going on at the same time this year, and truthfully, doing 30 while going to grad school and working full time was probably too many. If you've noticed, I'm behind on my reviews, and that was honestly because of that, because I have like 6 or 7 shows I still need to do write-ups for that are in the backlog. I'm working on them now, but they'll happen eventually. But so 2025 probably going to be what I plan to do. For the second part of it, how has it progressed? There's trends that have been going on. I remember when I used to go to indie shows, especially when I would take the drive with some friends down to places like Eldon, Missouri, and because I was always a WLW guy, I didn't drive for a while, and unfortunately, some of the Kansas stuff was a ways away from me. I used to live in Warrensburg, and so there was a few times some of those shows were pretty sparsely attended. And there's one thing I've noticed that has been going on since 2022 is that even if they're papered in some way, a lot of the shows are getting way more attendance than they did a while back even. I know it's not the glory days of, people selling out 1,000 seat arenas and stuff like that, but it's interesting that, you can have shows around here that have done 200 pretty consistently, 300. There's been shows that have got up over 600. CSW Deal with the Steel 4 had somewhere around that over in Kansas City, Kansas. So, it's really interesting to kind of see how that's gone. The thing that's concerning me right now is with inflation and the cost of living kind of going up. I have noticed that some of the more casual fans just aren't going to anything, much less wrestling shows. So I really hope that some of this stuff, without going on a big political tangent, I really just hope some of this stuff gets squared away and we can get back to normal here soon, because we really don't need a repeat of anything similar to what happened during the COVID pandemic with this, where, it damn near killed indie wrestling in the area. All right. Thank you, Kara, for that. I appreciate it. All right. What are your thoughts on the amount of high spots or seemingly over choreographed matches? Are you for or against it? And that's from David. Um, it depends on what you're talking about. If you mean simply like you have matches that are so full of spots that they end up looking like more of a dance routine or something, there is a fine line between, something like most, I'll go back and say like Lucha Libre is very choreographed and everything is planned out ahead, and a lot of lightweight and cruiserweight matches are kind of similar to that in that everything's planned out. You do run the risk though of just running wild with it, and all of a sudden everything's telegraphed. You can tell that a spot's about to happen. Um, when I do like to be able to suspend my disbelief a little bit. So when you have the people, and I'm the farthest person to sound like Jim Cornette, so let me just tell you that. But I do prefer kind of a more old school wrestling style. And when 16 guys are all lined up outside of the ring waiting for a guy to do a dive onto them and stuff, that stuff's kind of silly to me. But if done well, even spots like that can be good. So it just depends on who's doing what, and the as long as you have some good psychology and it makes sense to be doing certain things, you can make pretty much anything look great. So you can have your over choreographed like spot fest match, like what a lot of people have done over in like Japan and stuff. And as long as it makes sense and you're not just watching, people take moves like, the people don't sell sometimes. And this is as close as a rant I will get on some of this. And so there's nothing worse than watching someone do like a 450, land on someone, and then they get right back up, and then all of a sudden they're trading off crazy moves. I really wish that more people doing that kind of stuff would sell, and it would make the matches so much better. They can do the crazy stuff, but sell. And so that's my 2 cents. Like I said, I don't actively criticize matches that I see. I try not to, like I said in my first episode, I'm not a dirt sheet guy, and I'm not a worker. I don't know, the work. Like I know what's cool to watch, but I don't particularly. I'm not going to sit there and tell people what they did wrong because I don't know. But I know that sometimes it doesn't make sense, and it comes across like you're watching someone play a video game or something. So I think that's where I draw the line. All right. Thank you, David. Next up. All right. This is a long one. What are your thoughts on how open the business has become in terms of letting the fan in, and also if you think it's a detriment to the business? What pro wrestling means to you, and maybe some positive memories regarding it. I'm not. This would be something that like an old timey wrestler would probably have a crazy opinion on. It's cool with indie shows how close up you can get with the talent. I'm an autograph hound, and I love going up and getting, buying 8x10s and stuff. I have these binders that I put them in, and, the hope one day is that if somebody gets famous, I won't sell them or anything, but I can be like, hey, check this out. This is his first match. It was like when some of the WLW guys from about 15 years ago started getting called up, like Simon Gotch. I had an autograph of his prior to him going up there. So it was always cool to kind of pull that out and be like, hey, look at this. So, that aspect of it, like, and kids absolutely love meeting the wrestlers and going around and everything. High-fiving people, taking pictures. You look at WWE and, we're coming down from WrestleMania and people were paying like 10 grand just to meet somebody and stuff like that. And I think, for wrestling historically being a blue collar form of entertainment, one of the only true forms of entertainment that has pretty much come solely out of America, to gentrify it in the way that a lot of these companies are trying to do and make it to where only wealthy people can afford it is aggravating to me. So that's one of the reasons I respect indie wrestling a lot, is because they don't do that. You can still go in, you can shake the hand of people, you can take pictures and stuff like that. If you mean more like letting fans be part of the business, it like, you don't see that around here as much. I know there's companies where they let like backyarders in, and I can't imagine that works very well. I personally think that if you're going to be part of it, you need to be trained in some way and have a respect for the business. Because like, you go to any show and you'll have people looking for the promoter and trying to go up there and be like, hey, I want to referee tonight. Can I step in there? And it's like, you don't know. I can't imagine how that they're answering that, because that's got to be frustrating, But so as long as someone comes in and they do the work and they respect the business, hell yeah, you put them in there. That's how everybody started. I'm not going to pretend I'm in the business, but like my kind of adjacent nature to it, where I basically came in and started writing reviews and producing material and stuff. I did some stuff. I mean, I came in and I didn't just roll in there and start, writing a dirt sheet and like slagging everybody off and everything. I came in and made sure to, like, initially I laid really low, but I made sure that if I had questions like, hey, what's this person's name? I would reach out, talk to people. I would offer my pictures that I take, bad as they are sometimes, to people. I would, make sure I wasn't disrespecting anybody. I never try to put myself over. I think I have a T-shirt with my logo on it, and that's about as close. This is the first time I've really put myself out there, honestly, with this. So if you're, as long as you're not rolling in and trying to be crazy or put yourself over or something like that, it's I think largely it's fine. And there's ways to get in there and actually help the business. That's one of the things I'm trying to do. If I can get at least one person to go to a show and buy a ticket, I feel like my job is accomplished. Because, and I'll go to shows and I'll hype stuff up. I'll hand out, business cards and stuff. It's just like you need to be doing that kind of stuff. You don't want to be a leech on it. And I think that's the problem sometimes is people, they either think they're going to be rich at an indie show or something like by getting in there, or they want to leech off of it in some way. And that's the wrong way to do it. So, I know that's been a big rambling answer, but basically, if you're wanting to get in there, talk to people, show up. If you want to become, not everybody can become a wrestler. If you're trying to, I'm 43 years old. I'm not going to wrestle. I did backyard wrestling when I was in high school, and I hurt my back and stuff. That's not going to happen. And I always kind of wanted to have something to do with it, so I started writing blogs and making magazines and stuff. That's how I've gotten into it, And that's one of those things where if you're willing to put in the work, there's all sorts of stuff you can do, but you got to be willing to put in the work. And if people are willing to put in the work, I don't mind. But yeah, that's kind of my view on that. You also asked, what does pro wrestling mean to me, and maybe some positive memories. I could do a whole thing about positive memories. I think one of my favorite memories ever with indie wrestling shows was the very first indie show that I went to was a WLW show in Richmond, Missouri. This was in 2007, not too long before the TNA Lockdown pay-per-view. And TNA's The Monster Abyss was in town. So some friends of mine and I went, and I believe it was at Walmart. We stood out in front of a Walmart bank and waited for wrestlers to show up. And it was funny because all of a sudden this like huge dude, like probably, he's like 6'10" or whatever he's 6'8", I don't know, whatever he's billed as versus what he really is. Giant guy, way bigger than me, comes walking in wearing a brightly colored tie-dye shirt and a fanny pack, no mask. This is before people knew what he looked like. And my friend and I are like, is that Abyss right there? Like who else is that going to be? Gigantic dude walking in with a fanny pack and Zubaz pants on and everything. So that was pretty funny. And what was cool was, he was still doing the gimmick where he didn't talk, but we get up there and we're first in line. And he's like, hello, gentlemen. And we just talked and shot the crap with Abyss for like 10 minutes or something before the signing started. And then later we were trying to find the venue for the show. And we ended up back in the back of the Richmond Community Center trying to figure out where the entrance was. And here comes Harley Race pulling up in a car, and Abyss gets out, sees us standing there, probably thinking that we're weirdos, and he's like, long time no see, guys, or something. That's stuck in my head as like one of the funniest things. And like, I will, go on record, Abyss is one of the coolest guys to get to meet at a show and talk to. So that's probably my most fond memory. And it means a lot to me to be able to do this stuff. I mean, wrestling's not perfect, and I've seen it, people embittered by it and everything, but it's fun. It's a thing that I can do to spend time on. I'm not out here sports gambling or something. Or watching endless fantasy football or something like that, or going out and like blowing money on stuff. I am I'm focusing my time into watching wrestling, which I was going to probably do it anyway. It just kind of gave me a task and keeps me busy, keeps me off the streets. All right. So John asks, what are your favorite feuds you've seen played out in the past few years, and what makes a good indie feud versus TV feud? Well, I mean, indie versus TV, you obviously don't have the amount of time to do stuff unless you have a company that runs like weekly shows or something, which is very unlikely around here. Um, so you got to really make it count. You could have you could tell a great storyline on like over a weekend or something if you had like, prime example, Tri-States Wrestling used to do these like tours, and they would occasionally have like a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday, and you would go to the three places and watch the each show, and they could pull off a whole feud in the span of three shows that was every bit as compelling as something that would have gone on in another company for like 3 4 months or something, just by virtue of having the everything happen day after day like that. So like I said, you don't have the time. You got to really make things count, and you can't just you don't want to drag it out too long. I mean, you don't want to make a situation where you can you can have a long running feud, but you got to get some payoffs in there. I think a good example of a very well done feud is I think one of the favorite ones. I'll tell you what. I'll go through the big five. I might even throw in some of the last two, and we'll talk about each one. So, like a well done long running feud in the area was Trailblazer Championship Wrestling has had a approximately 2 year long feud now between Van Bam Winkle and Fox 4's Marcus Officer, and it started where Winkle came out and disrespected him and was basically sexually harassing Wendy, the ring announcer, and eventually it came to blows at the next show, and then he disappears for a while and comes back, and he's still got a chip on his shoulder, and it escalates to the point where there's a match, and you know they just announced another iteration of it, so that has been running for a long time. But you do get those little spots in there, like when they had at Monsters Brawl 4 this past October, they had the big blow off match where they, the heels got their comeuppance finally, and now they can continue it if they want. But like you had that payoff there, and they did a good job with that. Similar, Tri-States Wrestling had a great storyline with the Iceman, which unfortunately culminated with his retirement. Um, and the first Tri-State show I went to was in Chillicothe, Missouri, and he ended up winning the title. And I was not unfamiliar with the Iceman. I had seen him on Metro Pro, and I had seen him at a couple of New Breed shows in the past. So it was cool to see someone I recognized win the belt, and then basically going from that to losing the belt by like about halfway through the year, and then going on a huge losing streak, and then building himself back up, eventually getting the belt, going for the belt one last time, and then having it stolen from him by Dr. Ison, who cashed in something similar to a Money in the Bank contract. And then the thing there where Iceman was still kind of having some trouble, and it culminated finally the following year with him beating Dr. Ison for the championship in a street fight. So that was a really good one. KCXW had a whole year where basically one of the first shows I went to of theirs recently was like after, because I had gone to a couple in the past, was one where they Hal Rogers ends up winning the championship at a show, and he basically puts the whole company through just a reign of terror where he's cheating as much as he can, stealing wins from people. He's stacking the deck in Iron Man matches, and all sorts of stuff like that. And it eventually just culminated with him eventually dropping the belt. That was a really well done storyline. Fountain City right now, their most intriguing thing they're doing is whether or not All Steel Jay Fowler is ever going to cash in his championship title shot, and when he's going to do that, what that's going to look like, because he is the looming specter over the whole company right now. Camaro Jackson has anything to do with anything, he's usually there getting ready to do something and playing with him, coming out and acting like he's going to cash it in and dropping back or something like that. And it's that kind of stuff has been pretty crazy, witnessing it. Let's see. So I got KCXW, Fountain City, Trailblazer, Tri-States. I'm trying to think of like New Breed. You've had the SOB storyline going on for a while, and coming off the heels of you're having the entire thing where it was a private practice had folded, and you've got Derek Teeter comes in, and you've got now this group that's vaguely reminiscent of something like the New World Order, and they're just taking over the company. And you've got this feud going on between Scotty Z and Money Mike Pettis, and it's like one of those things where he he's always on getting the last laugh on everything. Pettis is. So that's been really good. CSW is kind of in a weird spot because they did have that long hiatus. They ended up taking the majority of 2024 off, and so right now they're still kind of reconsolidating. But if you go back, I mean, nothing in 2022 could compare to the Tribe versus the Premier. That was one of the best feuds of that year. And truthfully, it's crazy how well attended the big blow off for that was. Like I said, Deal with the Steel 4 had like probably 600 people or something crammed into that building. That was crazy. I went to two NXT shows at Cable Dahmer Arena that probably had maybe a little more than that. So for that, and that's TV exposure. Not really at the time. It was when it was still on the network, but to have a local company pull that is pretty crazy. And Show Me States, they had this really long feud between El Diablo and Austin Bulitalo that I was there in Moberly when that finally came to a head, and they had been just back and forth on each other, interrupting each other's matches. CJP gets involved, doing bad, referee work on stuff. Really, really good storyline, and it's one of those things where it was simple enough they could continue it through the year without having to just weigh everything down with constant rematches or anything. So I would say out of the 7 main companies I follow, that's a good idea of what I've really liked. But there's other stuff in there. I will still hype up the feud in like Trailblazer between Bobby Joe Black and Salem Gust, because you had 2 relatively new guys that went in there, just had an old school feud that with lumberjack matches and stuff, and there was no real fluff to it. It's just 2 guys that hated each other. You do something like that, I'm gonna dig it. I'm an old school wrestling guy, so that's music to my ears. All right. Looks like Jeffrey asked me, what are your favorite matches, wrestlers, places you've been to, and places you want to go in the business? I still consider myself to be like adjacent to the business, so I don't know if I would, but one thing I hope I get to see while I'm doing this stuff is I would love to see a show run in Memorial Hall again. I don't know how that probably costs an insane amount of money to rent that, and they would have to have some company just going crazy on sales to be able to pull that off. But if someone can pull off having a show at Memorial Hall, I think that would be incredible. I don't know how well upkept that building is or anything like that, but I think that would really go to show that Kansas City's back on the map, because Kansas City, their wrestling scene, has had so many starts and stops, and it's been largely overlooked by the greater wrestling community that it's one of those things where I think that would really solidify its place, and it would make it more of a destination, because you get that that's such a legendary venue. It would be awesome. So I would like to see that. I might have to do a full episode about favorite matches and wrestlers. If we're talking like all time, I am a big Mick Foley guy. So I think I've told people one of my favorite wrestling matches of all time is when they were doing the In Your House pay-per-views, Mind Game '96, Shawn Michaels versus Mick Foley. If you talk about the perfect way to because I think one of the problems right now in some wrestling is like heels have a tendency to try to be cool at the expense of doing what they need to be doing sometimes. And Foley went out there, and it's like a master class of how to look like a crazy guy. He's screaming, ripping his hair out. At one point, his leg, he's selling a leg injury, and he takes like a little, like almost like a prison shiv or something, starts hitting himself in the leg to get the feeling back in it, and just the whole everything about the commentary and how that match was done. I'm not even a huge Shawn Michaels guy, to be honest, but it was great. And they're there for a while, like '96 to '97, and both because I was more of a WCW guy, but both companies at the time was insane. I'm a big Sting. If I were to make a Mount Rushmore, my top 5 wrestlers of all time, I was a huge Sting fan. Still am. I was so excited to meet him at Comic-Con. Same thing with Foley. I've always, going backwards, I always liked Terry Funk. I loved going back and watching old Terry Funk matches. You got to get the Macho Man in there. And, that's 4. Who else am I going to put in there? Probably the Great Muta, because I do like some Japanese wrestling. And Great Muta, just that character alone, he transcends, being a babyface or a heel, because you see Muta and you just know it's going to be, an incredible match. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just looking forward to doing what I can. I want to see some of these guys that are up and running right now get more experience in, and it's going to be incredible. Get 5 years. I think Kansas City's going to be really hopping. All right. That's it for questions. That's the closest I will get to being critical on stuff, I suppose. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in YouTube or drop them on Facebook, and I'll be happy to answer them on the next episode, which I'll be doing sometime before the beginning of May, because I'm going to talk about how crowded the beginning of May is with shows. All right, so the rest of April, we've got KCXW Unleashed, which is this Saturday, basically. And I already kind of talked about this in the last episode, but so GA tickets are still available, $10 for kids, $15 for adults, 13 and up. It's at the KC Ozark Armory, which, like I've mentioned, great venue, plenty of room, really cool setup depending on where they put the ring. So it's always usually draws a pretty good crowd. Happy to be going there. You've got Team Double Stuff versus the Squires, hot off of their Tri-States win. Let's see if they can continue that in KCXW. You've got your Burt Candy versus Clay Huna, kind of the two of the top guys. Burt Candy just came down after losing his first championship match at a recent show against El Diablo. So dropping down, going up against Clay Huna, you would have to wonder if Clay Huna gets this. He's got to be in contention for the championship at an upcoming show. So that's going to be interesting to see. Women's Championship, Shailene against Mercy. The whole thing between Shailene and Mercy has been weird. Mercy seems like she really, she's really good friends with Shailene, but it's almost like in an obsessive way. So I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. That ought to be interesting to see what happens. And the KC Rumble, which right here, KCXW posted a poll asking who they thought was going to, who you were voting for to win the Rumble. And they have given the list of names. So I'm going to go through that real quick here. You got David Catton, Rad Rico, Sean Andrews, who is one of the commentators, who accidentally got himself in the middle of the whole thing, which is, why I voted for him. Tobias Storm, Charlie Graham, Squire Henry, Calvin Aldridge, Jude Weiss, Lady Pride, Atlas Armstrong, Talon Graves, Hard Luck Hal Rogers, Richard Goldman, Heavyweight Hendricks, Kenny Kingston, Kavar Cambridge, Old Glory 2, Psychotic, Gerard Dvorsky, and Blair Dior. I think, on one hand, you've got the numbers game with the extremists in that match. One would say the combination of Lady Pride, David Catton, and Jude Weiss in there, that's going to be pretty interesting to see if they can pull some stuff off. Then you've got, Kenny Kingston, who's huge. And if anyone's going to throw people around like ragdoll, it's probably going to be him. But honestly, if part of me rooting for Shawn Andrews, because I think that would be pretty fun. But it pains me to say this, but Hal Rogers is probably going to be my pick for this, because if there's someone that knows how to take a match and twist it around and do things to his benefit, it's going to be him. I would not be surprised if he ends up getting it, because we've watched him in like the 3-way Iron Man match where he's decided to sacrifice points to beat people up with a wrench at one point, and he ended up being able to segue that into racking points up. So it doesn't take long for him to come up with some kind of scheme. So I think that's who I'm leaning towards, truthfully. All right. We got our show report here. So, like I said, I was in Moberly, Missouri, which is from where I am in Independence. It's about a 2-hour drive due east. You pretty much stay on 24 highway the whole way, even though 24, like, you have to go north for a while, and it's kind of weird. And the road was blocked, so we went through like every farm possible to get there. And but like I said, it's about as far out as I'm willing to go unless somebody crazy shows up. But I like this venue quite a bit, and I didn't want to miss it. So it was called Retro Combat, and it was in conjunction with a retro gaming convention that they held prior to the show. So you could go in and to get a combo ticket and buy like some Pokemon cards and video games and stuff, and then stay for the wrestling. It was unfortunately on WrestleMania weekend, so I have a feeling it didn't have as much of the full crowd like I had wanted, but the people that were there were very loud, and it was a really good crowd, and it just, like, they put on a hell of a show no matter what. Here was the card a little bit. We're kind of gonna run through this. So the show started out with the Thoroughbreds going up against Sexy Rexy Rex Amadeus and Beastzilla Mike Dansky, who kind of disappeared after being in Tri-States for a little while, and he resurfaces and just in a bad mood. And aligning himself with Amadeus is kind of always a bad call in my opinion. But the Thoroughbreds had the crowd firmly placed behind them. They really went in there and did the work, and they managed to get the win. Blair Dior, ever since he turned on Burt Candy back in Marshall, Missouri, he didn't have his manager with him, but he still went out there, and just the arrogance and the flashy offense, he managed to somehow get a win on Clay Huna, and it's just like everybody was upset. You can imagine. This was my first time seeing Lilith Khan, the spawn of Khan. She is very imposing. She stands, leagues taller than anybody else in that women's division. What she lacks in speed, those chops and everything, and headbutts that she does are crazy. And, I think the only thing that kept her from just a runaway victory was the fact that just Missy was the special guest referee, clearly gunning for Shailene and going out of her way to mess up the match, basically. And the whole thing just turned into a big brawl. So it went out to a double count out, and I'm sure that's going to continue on until we eventually see Missy and Shailene go at it again. El Diablo defeated CJP, who had wheeled and dealed his way into a title shot, and like you saw the video earlier, didn't turn out good. He got some good offense on him, but eventually, I think the speed of El Diablo, he was able to get on the top rope, and that was just kind of the end of that. CJP, hell of a wrestler. He just needs to stop worrying about the crowd so much, because it was that's all he did, yelled at the crowd, and El Diablo took advantage of it. You had a couple of tag team matches. Your first one was the main attraction, where James Moore and Calvin Aldridge came out and managed to beat Hard Candy, which is Burt Candy, and Slammer by pinfall. This was, of course, after interference. CDC came out and attacked Slammer, which made it to where, you basically ended up having Candy getting screwed. He got, had a pinfall on the ropes, and, after cheating and everything else. So very tainted win for the main attraction. And I think SSW management saw that and immediately sent the Thoroughbreds out to have another match. And the Thoroughbreds, in very short order, like maybe 30 seconds, managed to beat the main attraction. So by the end of the show, it was actually the Thoroughbreds that left the champions. So pretty crazy. Yeah, that was that really got the crowd going. Everybody really liked it. You had a triple threat match. Luke Anthony managed to beat the Diamond, Marco Hendricks, and the Hoodbilly CDC by pinfall. Luke Anthony, no matter where he is a human highlight reel. Some of the stuff that guy can do. Calhoun ended up getting pulled out of the match early because, like you can imagine, Slammer wasn't too happy about what happened earlier, came out and attacked Calhoun, and they left. And that kind of left Luke Anthony to go one-on-one against Marco Hendricks, and he managed to pull off the big win. Main event was the SSW Frontier Championship. Tobias Storm ended up retaining his championship against Italian Grit, Joe Vanetti, and it was a pretty solid match. Looked like Vanetti might have tweaked his knee at one point or something, and Tobias definitely honed in on that and managed to get the win. So, all top to bottom, hell of a show. We're going to look at a little quick video I have here of the highlights. So, 1 second. All right. And with that, I think we have a podcast. See you guys next time. We've run almost 45 minutes of me just jabbering on. So if you guys want to send me more questions or you have ideas of stuff we can talk about, feel free. I've got the next show. We're going to be talking about how the fact that on May 1st through the 3rd, you're going to have a Fountain City show, a new company called Midnight Pro Wrestling and Trailblazer, all kind of running at the same time. So that's going to be kind of crazy. And we're going to have a rundown of the KCXW show I'm going to this weekend. So as with always, thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow the Facebook page, and go in there, ask me questions, come up with things you want me to talk about on here. And once shows kind of die down a little bit, I'll try to get an interview going here soon. So if you'd like to see an interview, feel free to start dropping some suggestions of who you'd like to see, and we'll make it happen. But other than that, you all have a wonderful night. Thanks again for watching Arcadia Pod. Goodbye.